Welcome back to First Light, the show where we dive into the stories behind the leaders, creators, and visionaries who are shaping their industries and shining a light for others to follow. I'm your host, Chris Keller, and today I'm joined by Andrew Finkelstein, the managing partner of Jacoby and Meyers and Finkelstein and Partners, two of the most well-known and respected personal injury law firms in America. He's a nationally recognized trial lawyer, a leader in mass torts, a teacher to thousands of attorneys around the country, and someone who's helped secure justice in some of the most complex and catastrophic cases you'll find anywhere. Andrew, welcome to First Light. All right. I am lucky to have Andrew Finkelstein join us on First Light today. And I've been blessed to get to know Andrew. Andrew, for those who may not know you, why don't you take a second, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about who you are?
I'm a trial lawyer who is a deterrence lawyer at heart and prosecute any type of catastrophic injury case all across the country, but primarily in New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Northeast.
I love when you
I mean,
say,
I can go on and on if you want, but
yeah, no, well, I'll break it down. I love when you say deterrence lawyer, and we're going to go into your career, but when you say deterrence lawyer, talk about what that means. I thought that was very interesting when you when you said it that way. You're the first and probably first and only attorney I've ever heard say it that way.
well, if you look at what the essence of what we do, there's two elements as a personal injury is two components. One is to compensate for the losses that have occurred, and that's what everybody focuses on. But if you go back to your Hornbook law, the purpose of tort law is one, to compensate, and second, to deter others from engaging in this similar activity. So I focus more on the second part of the purpose of tort law as opposed to the first part. The first part's the easy part, to make somebody whole. I'm not suggesting it is easy, but comparatively, um, deterrence is the challenge.
Yeah. Now, what's so impressive to me is what you've built with your firm, and I know your firm has gone through different versions, but kind of talk about scaling, kind of what the early lessons that you've learned that really shaped you um, and helped you grow like this massive, enormous firm. Now being the leader of these major firms.
Well, what shaped me is certainly my father's influence. I joined my dad's firm right out of law school. It was a one office, one location, and we've grown to five different law firms in, I'll say, 17 to 20 different locations, three different states, four different states actually. And that's just such a hard question to answer. What has shaped me? There's a lot that has. Um,
Well, let's talk about it this way. When you look back, you've accomplished so much, and mass verdicts, and building a law firm. What is kind of one of your biggest accomplishments, or one of the accomplishments you're most proud of when you look back over the course of your career?
I'll tell you what comes to mind right away. I don't know if I would define it as the most, but what comes to mind right away are the longevity of the people who work here, that the average time that have been people who have committed their professional careers to this organization, and um, in essence, to me, the average time people are here is 23 years or so. And it is not uncommon for people to have a 40-year anniversary, 45. I've got three people here, 50 years or more. Um, Many people in their 40 years. To be here 30 years is definitely an accomplishment, but it's not, um, it doesn't stand out. There's dozens of people who have been here 30 years or more. So I am most proud of that.
That was one of the things I was most impressed when we talked, and when you gave us your time at my firm to kind of talk about some of the lessons and talk about how you guys handle cases. That really stuck out to me too. And so, what do you
Why,
attribute
why,
that
don't,
to?
why don't you? I'm gonna turn the tables a little bit. Why don't you talk a little bit about? me coming to your office and what benefit, if any, you got from that.
Yeah, so we were blessed that the introduction was made, and an attorney told me that one of the best things, if not actually, I think his exact words were the best thing he did all year for his firm and for his attorneys was to bring you in to speak. And for me, that was a huge endorsement at the time. I didn't have a relationship with you, but he did, and so I reached out and said, "Hey, I would love for you to come and speak to our attorneys." And you did. You gave your time willingly and freely to come and spend a whole entire day with our attorneys, educating them on negotiation, how to handle cases, and how to value cases, and how to look at cases, and most importantly, how to present cases. And I know that today still we talk about that. We say, well, kind of what would Finkelstein say or do, and how would he approach this case? And we ask for the quick, the quick synopsis, because there's so many times people want to explain away and tell us so much about their cases. So it's changed everything. We're still implementing some of the great concepts you gave us to make sure that we're evaluating cases fairly. But we talk about the anger button. We try to find that anger button and talk about that. We're evaluating cases so much differently, and I know we're seeing an uptick in our negotiations as well from the time that you spent
Yes.
with us.
Oh, that's awesome.
A
That's great.
massive, awesome. And the only thing I wish is I had more time with you, and I had more time to have you with our attorneys, because it was such a huge value add to our team. And I know everybody still talks about that day and reflect on it. But let's talk about how you built that culture, because that is, you have such a strong culture. And really, I think one thing that makes changes firms from good to great and makes great firms like what you've built is a strong culture, that high performing culture that really does demand the best. And most of the times that starts at the top with the leadership. So how can you say that you built this strong culture?
You clearly define it and then you live by it, right? I definitely live by what our culture is, and our culture is uh, what we call the six C's: care, compassion, and concern for our colleagues, our clients, and our community. And we measure people whether they are culture carriers or culture killers. And um, we look, the reality is you spend a lot of time with people that you work with, and you want to be with people who are of like minded principles. That doesn't mean if they're not of the same principles that you have that they're bad people. It's just you don't have an alignment. But uh, once everybody is in the same alignment as to the core principles of what who you are, um, then uh, it takes away a lot of issues. And what my responsibility is to make sure people are in alignment with what our culture is, and um, if they're not, bring them around or let them go because they are not consistent with what we want to be.
Yeah, I think
And
that's one.
it's not an easy undertaking, but I think it's one of the most important undertakings as a manager of an organization.
Well, I want to talk about that because it's the people management side of it. I think is one of the hardest parts that people have in building and growing a firm. And I know you've built a firm strong on systems and strong on people. And so, how do you do that balance of running a firm, getting the best out of the firm, but also managing that very difficult people side of it?
It's recognizing that conflict is healthy, and I welcome conflict because without conflict, you never progress. So I encourage people to challenge me. And when I say conflict, that doesn't mean it's a negative. Um, there are no personal attacks ever. It's just a difference of opinion. That's what conflict is, right? And if there's differences of opinion, then you discuss why one person takes the position that they take versus another. And then like minded people can figure it out and come to a resolution of that particular conflict. But at the end of the day, there has to be a final decision maker, which I am. Um, I don't think anybody would doubt that in my organizations. But I think the reason why people stay so long is because I fully and fairly articulate why I make the decisions that I make. You don't have to agree with it, but the foundational component that everybody knows is that I make decisions that I believe are first in the best interest of our clients, then in the best interest of the organization. And as long as people are making similar decisions in their respective jobs in my firms, um, I never I never have a problem with it. They may not be the right decision, and I'll be the first to say I don't agree with what that decision was, and I'll outline the reasons why, but nobody's penalized for it because as long as, I should say, the decision at that moment in time was made with what they thought was the best interest of the client and then the firm. And if they can articulate why they made the decision, why they thought it was in the best interest, that's all I need. I do not. Um, um, there's no penalty associated with the wrong decision.
Yeah, I think what you said about conflict. So many times, I think leaders um, really are afraid of conflict. They're afraid to have those difficult conversations. Just we're as attorneys, we're adversarial. We're faced with conflict all the time. And when it comes to have to like sit down and have that difficult conversation, we often challenging. What do you think the biggest mistakes that leaders make in trying to grow and scale a business?
They presume. They just presume too much, and they have not mastered the art of delegation. Um, I'm just going to circle back to conflict a little
Yeah,
bit.
please.
What I always tell people, um, that you can always ask, and I encourage people to ask whatever it may be. Right? You fill in what people are asking for, um, but whenever the ask is made, it should never come with a presumption the answer will be yes. As long as the ask is made understanding the answer may be no, then we have no problems. But when an ask is made with the presumption of yes, then there's inherent disappointment, which is just unfair to the person asking. Just because you ask doesn't mean uh, the answer should be yes. So that's oftentimes the conflict that um, I'll just say managing partners are confronted with. That people make an ask, and then they feel um, challenged with giving a no. But I always try to preface whatever before the can I come and I can I ask you something? Absolutely. But are you prepared to hear no? Before you even tell me what the ask is, are you prepared to hear no? Because if you're not prepared to hear no, don't ask me. Just don't ask me, right? Because that's not fair to me, right? If the answer is yes, and I say yes the vast majority of times, don't get me wrong, but if you don't address that up front, then suddenly um, the conflict becomes something different than the substance of what is being asked, and it devolves into a personality issue, and that you need to avoid at all costs.
How do you make sure that kind of trickles down through your organization though? Because once you get to such a size, they can't come to you for absolutely everything. So in your absence, how do you get your other leaders to understand and appreciate that?
Well, uh, I'd be naive to think if it does trickle down, right? It just doesn't happen. How do I try for it to happen? And it does in some instances. I have regular meetings, and I just had a 2 day meeting with all the lawyers in my office where I spoke of exactly this, and just it's a perpetual reminder. Um, but it's never set it and forget it. It's constantly checking in, right? So I lost track of before I circled back to that. What was your Do you recall what your question was?
Well, I think we were talking about how you balance running the business side with staying connected to the human side of what we do. So, obviously demanding the most out of people and getting high performance, but also understanding the human component of it all.
Yeah, so I don't demand the most or demand high performance. I think people, just because I say so, I think people are wired however they're wired. You will have high performers are high performers, and they're going to be high performers no matter what. Um, those who are not high performers, um, that's okay. But you just, as a leader, you have to recognize that, and you can't take a somebody who's not a high performer and think that you can incentivize or change somebody from who they are. That's I'm just sharing with you my personal opinion. I don't think there's a role for everybody. It's understanding where they what that role is. But the mistake that leaders make is they take a position that requires a high performer and they don't put a high performer in, and they think just because they've anointed them with that particular position that suddenly they'll become a high performer. I don't believe that. I don't believe that just because I just if they haven't proven themselves as a high performer, they don't suddenly become a high performer because they have more responsibility or there's more at stake. Just my it's
Yeah,
just my experience.
I couldn't agree more. I do want to talk a little bit about how you kind of approach um, presenting cases, because I thought the way that you had your attorneys come to you to present a case is just different than what I'd ever been taught or what I'd ever heard. For me, it was always kind of come and give all the good and the bad and what I thought and all that, and you just had a really straightforward approach. And so, and I think it really kind of goes to all aspects of life, not necessarily just case evaluation. But can you talk a little bit about kind of how you evaluate a case or evaluate anything for that matter? It was just so direct and straightforward.
Uh, I like the acronym BLUF, bottom line up front, right? So just give me the bottom line up front and then I'll move from there. So when you talk about case analysis, jurors, as a general rule, have, I'm going to say, three at most, often two, but usually there's one critical factor that will persuade a juror or anybody for that matter of fact as to why this happened the way it happened. So I want to hear that up front. So anytime somebody in my office, or if I go to another lawyer's office, they say, "Tell me about the case." If they don't start with exactly why we're going to win, I just stop them and say, I really don't care about what. Give me why we're going to win. So, like as an example, uh, a car crash case, oftentimes they'll say, "Well, it was on a Sunday. They're coming home from watching Super Bowl." And they had chili, and then I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, I just want to know. A distracted driver blew a red light. Okay, that okay. Now I got it. Um, a property owner left a hazardous condition in the middle of the parking lot. Failed to, and they it was there for however long, whatever it may be. Just bottom line it, and then we can build from there and tell the story and work backwards as to what the story is. I know a lot of great trial lawyers across the country, and one thing that I have found is consistent in talking with all of them is when they prepare a case for trial, they start with their summation. What is it that I want to say in my summation? And then they reverse engineer the strongest arguments to what they want to say in their summation. So, you know, it's as simple as that. Um, so I don't need to know most of the facts, and what lawyers do is they dilute the most important facts with extraneous facts that are just not material. Yeah, you might want to add those later on, but they aren't what is going to drive the result. And I'm results oriented.
I know you've gotten some, just large verdicts. You've gotten some large settlements, and like we were talking about, the one attorney who talked about, a case that you helped with, and he believed that you added such value to that case that his firm otherwise would not have gotten the value that without you being a part of it. So, can you talk a little bit about how you go about presenting a case, whether it's at trial or mediation, to really maximize the settlement, kind of your approach to negotiations? Because I think it was different than what I've seen and heard and been a part of in the past.
So negotiations, I- I've lectured on negotiations. I've like for 2 days at a time. So you're asking me to compress a lot into one answer, but I'll do my best at doing it. And um, the error that I repeatedly see by attorneys, I don't want to label it as one. Here are some of the errors: is they feel constrained by the policy amount, okay, and they view it from their perspective, not the insurance company's perspective. And if you change your uh, vantage point as to how you assess a case, and I'll outline it. Um, I believe there's really only three types of cases. There's a case that has um, minimum insurance, and the injury is far in excess of whatever the available insurance is. And when I say minimum insurance, in relationship to the injury, right? So you can have a $1 million of insurance, but if you have a $20 million injury, it's the same case as if you have a $10,000 insurance coverage and there's $500,000 worth of injury. It's the same assessment, right? Where the injury is far in excess of whatever available coverage there is. Notice I didn't say anything about liability because liability is not material in that situation. Because at the end of the day, insurance companies have a duty to protect their insureds. I'm assuming there's some liability, right? I'm not talking about no liability cases. So in those scenarios, there's really nothing to talk about. The other scenario is where there's a significant amount of insurance and the injury doesn't approach it, right? Or is right around whatever that insurance is. And then the third scenario is where there's huge insurance and huge injury. So just to put numbers to it, if you have $250,000 of insurance and you have an injury that's worth anywhere from $200,000 to $400,000, that is a case that'll get litigated. And the only question is, what percentage from the policy can they save? Because there's really no incentive to pay the full policy unless you're at trial. So that the amount of discount that you would provide is based upon where you are in that litigation. And then the third scenario, which is where I come in, the majority of the times, is huge insurance and huge insurance coverage and huge injury. And that's the case that you're asking me about, how negotiating in those cases. So all three of those types of cases have different negotiation strategies, right? So that's why it's hard to answer your question, but understanding globally that you don't negotiate every case the same way, right? And do not, especially in this scenario where there's the first one that I gave, where there is um, not enough insurance to cover the magnitude of the injury, do not feel constrained to demand the policy. That's the one mistake I consistently see from lawyers. The 250 in coverage and $5 million injury, they demand 250. Well, why would I demand more? There's only 250 in coverage, and I know there's no more. I have an affidavit of no excess. Well, why? Because then you've taken all the pressure off of the defense attorney and the carrier because they have certain duties. You come in with a $5 million demand. They have duties to their insured and or their client that are much different than if your demand is only 250. Their duty to put them on notice, their duty to protect them, everything associated with it, and then they can string it out. So that's just a different type of negotiation versus huge injury and huge coverage.
Yeah, the part I liked a lot about when you were talking was about um, kind of the percentages, and it was one way I never looked at it. I always just kind of did dollars and cents, and they're here and I'm there, and we need to try to get to this number instead of looking at what percentage of the policy am I saving them or something along those lines. And I always thought that I thought you talking about you got to look at it from a percentage of the policy that you're after versus just dollars and cents. I like that a lot, and talking
Yeah,
about
well,
that.
it's a percentage that you're going to allow them to save because that's how they evaluate it.
Yep.
Right? That's how insurance companies evaluate it. We paid 100% of the coverage. We paid 80% of the coverage. We paid 95% of the coverage. Right? That's how they evaluate it. It's not so much dollar and cents. And when they get audited after the fact, they don't come in. I mean, I'm speaking generally, but they don't come in and say, "Oh, you paid $85,000 on this $100,000 policy." Is you paid 85% of the coverage available. Why couldn't you have paid 60% or 70%? Because that's how they measure all of their um, generally their internal metrics are
Yeah.
based on percentages.
So that's one thing that we started measuring our attorneys by is by the percentage of the policies that they're recovering and recouping. Because as you talked about, that's how they're measuring their success, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to do it. So that's one of the metrics that we look at now, and took that from you. I really
Let me add just one. Let me add one more thing. What is our core? Not only, but one of our core jobs doing what we do, and I'll answer my own question. That is to give the insurance company the opportunity to overpay. Right? If you don't give them the opportunity to overpay, they never will.
can't you can't get if you don't ask, right? Uh,
Exactly right.
I know you've done a lot of pro bono work. I know you represented, families from 9/11. Can you talk about how that's had such a meaningful impact on your life doing the pro bono work, and also give your time to going around the country and teaching other law firm owners, other lawyers, how that's really impacted you in your career?
Well, it goes right to the culture of who I am and who what my firm is all about. Care, compassion, and concern, and that last is community. So at 9/11, I live in the community. I live in the Hudson Valley, where in particularly Orange County, there were dozens of firefighters who lost their lives in September 11th. I was at the time on the board of directors of New York State Trial Lawyers. Currently, I'm the president of Trial Lawyers, and we put together a program called Trial Lawyers Care, where we agreed to help whoever wanted through the process of the claims administration process pro bono. And I was the captain of the Hudson Valley area. So anybody who wanted or needed help, we were able to put them through that process. And we did it obviously without a fee. And when you talk to me about, I do spend a lot of time traveling and lecturing all pro bono. I don't take any uh, fees. I'm one of the leaders at Trial School, which is a not-for-profit litigation support litigation school, teaching trial lawyers how to represent their clients, and it's really a community. So my other community, aside from the community that I live in, is the community that I um, am associated with professionally, which are trial lawyers. So I think that um, to be true to my ethos, I have to, and I um, do as much as I can for the trial lawyer community,
What
which is why I'm currently the president of New York State Trial Lawyers and lecture a whole bunch. My attitude is I'm not in competition with any trial lawyer except to get the case. Once, once one, if I have the case, or if another one of my, I'll just call it advertising competitors, or a competitor to get the case. Once they have the case, I want them to do really, really well, and it only helps everybody when another trial lawyer gets a great result. So I'll do what I can to help them accomplish that.
So, through your career, I'm sure you've had the highs and lows. You've won big cases. I'm sure you've had a loss or two in there at some point.
You
Uh,
bet.
you've scaled the firm, and I'm sure you've had moments where it's been tough. So, what's kind of the things that have helped you through those highs and lows, through through the wins and the losses?
Um, I don't. I don't. I don't know how to say this, but I don't view them as highs, or I don't view them as lows.
It's a great
Right. So
answer.
I'm not. They aren't highs and they aren't lows. They are part of professionally what I do, and it's part of what we do. So yeah, I've had in the same year, I've gotten a $32 million verdict, and I've gotten no caused. And they were pretty close to one another, actually. And my reaction was the same for both. Of course, I was happy. That's not to suggest I'm not happy and all that, but look, it's about controlling your emotions. We're in a very um, emotional business where we're dealing with everybody else's emotions, and there's a lot at stake with what we do. And it is when you lose control of your emotions, that's when you make bad decisions. That's not to say you don't get happy, you don't get sad, you don't, right, but you have to have uh, really your emotions in check. And if you, most importantly, recognize when they're not, and don't make decisions in the time period when they're not in check. That's the key.
I think that's one of the hardest things that we have to learn is that level of control. Where do you think that comes from for you? Where do you get that level of control?
I just think about it all the time. Is really what it comes down to. So look, we can. How do I think about it? And I've said this in different examples, but this is what I always think of, and I hope I can articulate it the right way. But I've been fortunate enough to travel, and I was in. And it's not because of this; it really flows from a book. But I'm just going to use this as an example, and it really is just a metaphor for what controlling your emotions. But I was in Sri Lanka um, in 1988 or 1989, driving down the road, and I look out the window, and literally there's when I say driving down the road, a dirt road, one lane in the middle of a in essence a forest, and I look out and there's an elephant and a small little Sri Lankan on the elephant, and the Sri Lankan who's on that elephant tricked himself to thinking that he was in control. This is this several ton animal. And this guy, if he weighed 120 pounds soaking wet, that would have been something. And he's sitting on this several ton animal, thinks he's in control. And that's how it is with emotions. If you think you're the person riding the animal and in control of that animal and don't even think about it, which is your emotions, then you will not control those emotions. But if you're sitting on top of your emotions, understanding you don't have control of them, but you can recognize what they're doing, that is a step in the right direction. And that's what I always try to do. Is I can't control my emotions, but I try to recognize, what is it that I'm feeling. Am I angry? Why am I angry? Am I happy? Whatever it may be, and like, what's going on and what triggered it, because it's something that triggered. And oftentimes you don't know, but if you don't have consciousness of it at all, and not aware of it at all, then you have no shot of being able to make decisions that are um, tempered appropriately by your emotions.
You've had such an incredible career, and I know you've impacted your clients' lives. I know you've impacted your team's life. I've met some of your team members who've talked about that, and obviously you're having a major impact on the legal profession, helping other law firm owners learn. But what do you really hope that impact is when it's all said and done and you hang it up? What do you hope your impact has been?
I never think about that.
No.
It's honestly, it's totally immaterial to me. I don't. It is. I don't know. I don't. I don't really. I don't set out to have whatever impact it's going to be. I just try to. Uh, I truly believe I get more in return when I help somebody else than what they receive from me. Whether it be uh, more knowledge, more information, more experiences. But I think that's what certainly fulfills me. But I don't do it for um, you know. At the end of the day, we're all selfish, right? I don't. I'm not. I'm. Not, it's not this huge altruistic. I want anything other than making myself a better lawyer, and frankly, I think I become a better person by helping other people.
Well, Andrew, I want to thank you because I know that we haven't had a lot of interactions. I know every interaction that I've had with you, I've walked away better. I've walked away having learned something, having taken something to really think about how I can improve. And so I know that you've had an amazing impact on my life, and having an impact on my life has had an impact on my firm and those who I'm able to reach. So I thank you so much for your time, your generosity of your time, and your willingness to share your knowledge.
My pleasure. Appreciate the opportunity.
Andrew, thank you for joining us today. Your career is a reminder that the work we do matters far beyond the courtroom. It impacts families, it shapes communities, and it pushes entire industries towards accountability. Your clarity, your leadership, and your commitment to justice have made a mark on this profession, and I'm grateful for the wisdom you shared today. Until next time, keep shining your light.